So we have just hit the 1 o'clock mark here in London. So I'm going to welcome you all in the room and on Zoom to VuFind State of the Project 2024. And I should lead this by saying that if any of you are going to be at the VuFind Summit in Germany next week, I'm going to give exactly the same talk again. So please don't attend both of them, and I won't be offended if you walk out now. But otherwise, here you are, and I hope you enjoy it. So I'm Damien Katz. I'm Director of Library Technology at Villanova University. I'm also the Community Manager for VuFind's Project Management Committee. And I also have in the room with me here, Chris Hallberg, who works with me at Villanova and on VuFind. Chris will be monitoring the Q&A and the chat in Zoom, so please feel free to ask questions as we go. My expectation is that the presentation part of this won't take nearly the whole 50 minutes, so then there will be plenty of time at the end for answering questions or discussing things. So I will ask, please save your questions for the end, but if audio drops out or something crazy happens, urgently scream in the chat and Chris will help sort it out. We did lose internet in this room about 5 minutes ago, so I'm going to hope that that was an isolated incident, but brace yourselves, we'll do our best. So with that out of the way, I will see if I can get my keyboard to work, and then I can say welcome and make some thank yous. So first of all, thanks to the Open Library Foundation for supporting VuFind and open source. It's been great working with them for the last few years. And thanks to the WOLFcon planning group. And I realize I'm sort of a part of that group, but I'm not really thanking myself. I'm thanking them for doing all the things I didn't do and for welcoming VuFind to have a voice at the table and make sure that we're really a vibrant part of this conference. There's lots of VuFind related talks. I'm excited to see them. So thanks to everyone also who submitted something VuFind related to represent us here. And of course, also thank you to VuFind's registered service providers. We have a program where vendors who offer VuFind related services contribute to support the project, and then we mention them here. So thank you to all of these organizations. And if you have a VuFind problem that you need help with, reach out to them. They can help with things like hosting and customization and training and so forth. More details on VuFind.org if you want to find who's the best match for your needs. So I always like to start these talks by going over what's new since the last time we met. And in this case, we've had a few releases. First of all, the 9.1 series, which was a minor release. Then we had a couple patch releases. This, first of all, added a couple of new search backends that you can incorporate into your system. One for EBSCO Publication Finder, and another for the A to Z database list from LibGuides, and their author is in the room here. Thank you, Maccabee. Also, some new ILS functionality. We added improved proxy user support, so you can now see lists of not only who you are a proxy for, but also who is a proxy for you if you use that. We added the ability for the ILS driver to return record-specific URLs. So this allows, for example, a direct link to a native OPAC if you want to offer that capability, and if one exists. The ability for users to purge their own transaction history where supported, and an uncertain availability status. VuFind has long had a fairly binary view of availability, but there are some situations where you can't say one way or the other. It can now be represented in the code. But a little more exciting than 9.1 is VuFind 10.0, our latest major release. I've got lots to tell you about this. You'll be tired of it. First of all, we've introduced some new beta themes based on the Bootstrap 5 framework. So for many years, VuFind's themes have been using Bootstrap 3. It's worked well for us, but it's also end of life, and it was getting a little embarrassing that we were still using it. So thanks largely to the efforts of Ari Mayala and the team at National Library of Finland, we've got a Bootstrap 5 theme now, which looks and feels a lot like Bootstrap 3, and a Sandal 5 theme that's also a Bootstrap 5 variation of our Sandal theme. We're considering them beta in 10.0. So take this opportunity to try them out, see if you can adjust your local custom themes to extend them, because they're not going to be beta for long. More on that as we get into the future later. Also, the search results screen has been re-implemented so that it's a lot more dynamic. Rather than every click causing a full page reload, there's now more JavaScript involved. Things are more dynamic, which makes certain features more accessible and a slightly more responsive feel. But at the same time, this new system can just be switched off if you don't want the JavaScript dependency, and it will work if a browser doesn't have JavaScript, but what such browser exists in this day and age. We've also added persistent login support. So if you turn this on, users can click Remember Me and stay logged in for a period of time. It's off by default, so don't panic if you don't want that capability. We've added a rate limiting system. So I don't know if anyone else has encountered this, but certainly at Villanova, the unreasonable amount of crawling, probably from AI-motivated people without concern for other people's server health, has increased dramatically. And so now there's a configurable system you can use to restrict the number of requests that can come from the same place within a window of time and defend yourself a little better against some of that behavior. We also have a new explain feature, which I believe was demonstrated in a talk at last year's WOLFcon, so that users can have more visibility into where Solr relevance ranking calculations are coming from. You know, if you have the question, why is this thing the third in this list and this thing is the first in this list, this gives you a visual way to at least begin to answer that question. Again, off by default, but can be turned on for your power users. We added the ability to turn on-screen virtual keyboards. Again, the author of that is in this room. And so if you need the ability to search for records that use character sets outside of your region's keyboard standards, this provides a way to do that. And we have a mechanism for filtering facet lists using user input. So if you have a facet field with large numbers of values, previously you'd have to pop open a lightbox and hit more over and over again to scroll endlessly through it. Now there's also a box where you can type a substring and it will filter to just matching facet values. Additionally, in the favorites list, you can now select items across multiple pages of your favorites and then apply actions to them all at once, whereas previously the best you could do was a page at a time. And we have some new recommendation modules. We have consortial VuFind, which is designed for pulling in results from a third-party VuFind using its API, designed particularly for integration with Reshare, which uses VuFind for a shared catalog. So this gives you a way to show results from that third-party system embedded within your own catalog. Also, a databases recommendation module that can display your subscription databases that relate to the current search terms in a configurable way. It can integrate with libguides or not, depending on how you set it up. The list just keeps going. There is a new ILS driver called Composed, which allows you to bring together functionality from multiple drivers. So you can say, I want to use the availability status function from this driver, but I want to use the patron login from this driver, and I want to place holds with this driver, which at the moment, I don't think has a lot of applications within what we currently ship with VuFind, but I think it opens up possibilities for the future when there are multiple ways of doing things and we want to give users choices about that. You know, for example, with Folio, there are currently some debates about the best approach to doing certain things. This might be a road to having all the options and letting people pick what's best. We've also added support for network error logging headers through our content security policy system so that if you have a logging server set up, users' browsers can report information back to you about problems occurring during execution. We also added a bound with display, which currently only is implemented for Folio, but the mechanisms could be applied to any other relevant systems. For Primo users, we now support showing citation lists. We have added support for a tool called EasyProxy URL Checker, which if you use the EasyProxy proxy server, will look at your EasyProxy configuration and put your proxy prefix only on URLs that need to go through the proxy rather than globally, which is another tricky thing to do sometimes. And getting increasingly specialized here, we added the ability to deeply search within nested collections if you have a hierarchical index. This was developed for Villanova's digital library, which is deeply hierarchical, requires a bit of special indexing work, but if anybody else needs this, I'm happy to share more notes. And we added a new table of contents integration with the check service here that I don't want to mispronounce for you. It keeps going. We have more configuration settings than ever before. There's a new config file for the user account menu, so you can now turn off options you don't want, change the order of things, moves what used to be fairly messy code into a simple configuration. And there's also a record data formatter.ini file, which you can use to change displays of records. Previously, overriding record displays required creating custom factories and extending classes, and it was all a bit messy. You can still do it that way, but you can also now just do it through an ini file that covers a lot of the common use cases. We've improved some internationalization features. We added support for the ICU message formatter syntax, which is particularly useful when you have a phrase that needs to use different words based on pluralization rules, which can vary widely from language to language. So that's now built in and can be used. And we have added a new translation for Maori, contributed, of course, from some of our New Zealand collaborators. And there's more than this, but that's more than enough. If you want to see even more, I recorded a video going deep, deep, deep into the changes, even warning you about every code change you might have to worry about in your local customizations. So if you thought this was exciting, you can have about 40 minutes more of it. Just go to the VuFind.org videos page. So before I move on, I should just say, so many of those things I just featured were community collaboration, community contributions. And as I say, many from people in this room, it has been wonderful to have so many high quality contributions to the project and such a collaborative attitude from the people who shared them. It's been a real pleasure, though my whole life has become merging pull requests. I don't get to do much else, but that's a good problem to have. So what else? Community growth. Well, that ties directly into what I just said. But we also have done some things within the community of note. One being that we now use Localize as our standard translation platform. So in the old days, the system for getting VuFind's language files updated was me sending emails to 30 or 40 people and manually sending them lists of what needed to be translated and then manually putting all of those into the project. I still do it that way for people who prefer it that way, but there's now also a friendly web-based way that can automate some of those steps. And some people are using it, so it's already making life easier. Additionally, the project management committee worked this year on a documentation review process just to keep our published documentation current and relevant and accurate. So we published our proposed process and we've been working through it. So already we looked at our usage statistics, went through the 50 most accessed pages, corrected and brought up to date everything there. And we're now working our way through sort of the other end of the system, finding all of the pages that haven't been updated in 5 years or more and bringing those up to date or getting rid of them if they're no longer relevant. And finally, coming out of a good conversation in a recent community call, we've published a page on the VuFind website about our approach to accessibility, which is, of course, important to us as a project. And we're looking to continue formalizing that in the coming months, just to make people comfortable with the fact that VuFind is accessibility oriented and we'll keep making improvements as we can. So that's what's new. What is next on the horizon. Well, the very next thing is VuFind 10.1, our next minor release, which actually has a specific release date. It's set for November 4th, which means that my October is going to be very busy. One of the biggest priorities of this release is adding support for the version 2 WorldCat API, because OCLC is shutting down the version 1 API in December. They didn't give a whole lot of notice, but we've already got a working implementation up and in a pull request. So if any of you use the WorldCat VuFind integration, I strongly encourage you to check out that pull request, test it out, give us feedback, so that what we release is as good as it can be. But I think we already have something that's good enough, so we will have a release and people don't have to lose this functionality. They'll just have to do a bit of reconfiguration to move to the new API. Additionally, I already sort of hinted at this earlier, but we're going to make the new Bootstrap 5 based themes our default themes. So they are going to come out of beta, become the defaults. The Bootstrap 3 based themes will stay for now, but we will consider them deprecated because we do really need to move away from these outdated dependencies. So the whole VuFind 10 line is designed to help you transition your own themes forward. And there are some tools available to make this easier. Right now, the Bootstrap 5 theme includes a sort of Bootstrap 3 backward compatibility layer that reduces the amount of change necessary to make existing templates work. Over time, we are, of course, going to factor that out and bring everything fully up to date, but we want to make it as easy as possible to transition without having to do huge amounts of work. So we're doing it in stages, and this is where we will be with release 10.1. Also, some new features. There's a new sticky HTML elements feature, which you can configure in your theme particular CSS selectors to apply the sticky element to, and then those will stick to the screen when users scroll past them. This is useful for things like making your search box always visible. We have added some new permission providers to the permission system that can use either cookies or values in the session to grant permissions to users. The cookie-based one is called insecure cookie because cookies aren't inherently secure. And so it is not intended to be used to protect sensitive things, but it is a way that you could set cookies as flags to control what a user sees or how they get routed. And the session-based mechanism is secure if you want to have custom logic that does some amount of work and then grants a permission and redirects a user somewhere. This allows you to have some more customized access management functionality in VuFind as needed. Or if you don't care about that, don't worry about it. Also, ongoing accessibility improvements, always a priority. As I say, we've had some accessibility reviews. We've been working through incorporating the feedback received there. Really, I think every release of VuFind will have some growth in this area. And similarly, lots of bug fixes and minor enhancements. So once we're past 10.1, then we need to think about our next major release, VuFind 11, which will come out in 2025. And a lot of what's currently on my mind about this release isn't particularly glamorous, but is necessary, which is just in terms of upgrading and modernizing the application. So, of course, PHP keeps moving forward. We'll raise our PHP requirement to 8.2 once 8.1 hits end of life, which I think it will in just a couple of months. We will completely remove the Bootstrap 3 based themes in this release because for the release 10, we've had to keep 2 different versions of all of our templates in sync. That's worth doing to help people transition, but it's a lot of work to do forever. So this is where we draw the line on that. And we also need to replace a number of components we depend upon from the Laminas ecosystem that have been deprecated or put into security only. At this point, I list 4 of them there. So Laminas Crypt and Laminas Mail, as of right now, are both saying, this has been deprecated, you shouldn't use it anymore. And I don't like people seeing scary messages when they run Composer. So those are priorities to get rid of. We don't use much of the cryptography functionality, so I think that will just translate into native PHP, and we'll get rid of the dependency entirely. The mail library recommends switching to Symfony Mailer. I think that should be relatively straightforward, but haven't tackled it yet. And then beyond those urgent matters, there's the database layer, which is a project that's been ongoing for years because of its large scope. And I think we are going to get it done before it becomes a critical matter. For those who haven't followed the story so far, we use Laminas DB to interact with databases, but that library has really sort of fallen off. Doctrine is the thing that most people use for database abstraction in PHP land. So we've been working toward that migration for some time. The VuFind 10 release completely rewrote all of our database interaction code, not to get rid of Laminas DB, but to reorganize things into a way that will make the rest of the migration logical. So actually the biggest leap is already done. And so then for VuFind 11, we're just going to translate the parts of the refactored code that refer to Laminas to use Doctrine instead, work which is already well underway. And then we hopefully will be good to go. But this is something else that if you have expertise or interest in this area, I'd love to collaborate with you and get testing, just because it's a big change. There may be different performance characteristics or best practices that we want to work through. And then at the very end of the list here is HTTP, which is another Laminas component that's quite old, no longer growing or changing much. Hasn't been deprecated yet, but I feel that it may be someday, and I'd like to get ahead of that. So if time permits, that's another thing that we might change, but I think it's the least critical of the four listed. We also are still using some old features of Solr. This is another thing we've been talking about for years, but it works, so we don't change it, but someday we need to change it. So looking at using some more modern interactions with Solr would be good to do for this major release. And of course, there will also be new features, but we need to figure out what those are through our road mapping process, which is happening next week. So I'll keep plugging that as we go, but there will be opportunities to share your priorities with us. So community development going forward, some next steps. Raising funds is an ongoing process. We've been quite successful. We have, a modest amount of money in the bank, not enough to hire more developers or do hugely ambitious things, but enough to pay for tools and support activities within the community. It would be great to keep growing that. We have some ideas. We also, of course, want to keep improving our documentation. Also a perpetually ongoing process, but one that I think we've made great strides in with this year's formalization of our mechanisms. We need to have AI in our slide deck because every slide deck needs to have AI in it. But seriously, we need to think about both what the implications of changing expectations caused by AI are on the product itself, and also on how AI-related tools might help improve the software, the community around it, anything else. I'm personally, like I think everyone, I have mixed feelings about AI, but we should use the good and be careful about the bad and keep talking about it as a community. And it may be that we need to take some time in the coming year as a community to figure out what else we need to do. A few years ago, when the project management committee was forming, we did some exercises to get ideas and set priorities, and I think those were really valuable, and they've given us several years worth of work to focus on within the PMC. But I think we're starting to get to kind of a business as usual state of affairs, and maybe that's fine, but maybe it's also time to think about whether there are new efforts that we're failing to think of. So if anyone's interested in participating in that kind of activity, let me know. It's something that we might be able to incorporate into one of our community calls in the coming year. There's a nice toolkit called It Takes a Village for open source management. I bet we could find something good in there to make use of. And then here, I just wanted to once again emphasize that there's lots of VuFind content here at WOLFcon, but this year, the actual VuFind Summit is next week in Leipzig for VuFind Leipzig 2024 Future Discoveries, which is going to be on Monday and Tuesday of next week. And it is still open to register for free online. If you want to participate in that, you'll just want to skip this talk unless you want to hear this all over again. Except I won't be telling people to go there. So this is exclusive content for this talk. And if you want to get to the registration, just go to VuFind.org and click on the events section. The whole URL is very long, so this is easier than me reading you a long URL. And if you are going to participate in road mapping, or even if you just want to give feedback to the community at some other opportunity, I always like to bring up a few things to think about. One is, as I say, community development. Is there more we should or could be doing in the community to support everyone, be inviting, make it easier to participate? Are there features you really need? We have lots of things we could do. We have lots of work in progress. It would be great to know how to prioritize that. And there's nothing better than somebody wanting it to justify doing a thing. Similarly, have you already implemented something locally that you haven't shared? Please share it. I'm happy to work with people. Even if you have ugly, messy code that you're embarrassed by, if you give us something, we can work with you and bring it up to speed. And we won't tell you that it's ugly, messy code because that would be mean. Also, if you have particular needs for tutorials or documentation or training, I'd love to hear that. We have a robust set of training videos on the website. Courses run from time to time, but I'm sure it's not completely comprehensive. It's possible that some of these things have a few outdated facts in them, given that it's been a couple of years since they were recorded. So if things need to be brought up to speed or added, it would be good to know about that so we can give it some attention. And, feel free to say that you'd love to help us and give us lots of your time. We love that. And that is my presentation. And so we have about 20 minutes for questions and discussion. So feel free, and thank you for listening to me ramble. So yes, I see there's a question in the chat about a VPAP for VuFind. That is one of the more formal accessibility steps that I alluded to during the presentation. Chris, who's in the room with me here, has started putting something together, and I think we'll be working through the process with the PMC from his starting point. So stay tuned.
I'll type out the response in the chat because I don't think they can hear me, but I've gone through the form to make a VPAT, but there's some parts of misunderstanding that I want clarified before I submit it to the accessibility page and the leadership of VuFind. So I'll type it out.
I can also repeat it for the audience at home. Chris just said he's worked through the online form to build a VPAT, but there were some areas that might need more clarification, and he wants to get those details straightened out before he shares it more widely. So that is the current state of affairs, but it's a good start.
I believe you have a Slack channel that's specific to VuFind, so I'm trying to think about ways in which when I see something happening in our library catalog, which is VuFind, and I'm like, oh, this would be a cool feature, this is something I want to improve, to reach out to other people who use VuFind who may have already figured out a solution, and I haven't really figured a great way to do that. Would you recommend like a Slack channel or another communication way?
So the question from the audience was basically, what is the best way to engage with the community if you have a feature idea or something like that? Specifically, is Slack a good option for that? And I would say that at this point, Slack probably is the best way to do that. At the moment, we do have a VuFind specific Slack, and anybody who wants access to that can send an email to info@vufind.org and request access, and I'll grant you access. But we are in the process of moving away from that because we want to merge into an OLF Slack so that all the OLF projects can coexist. So we're already starting to make channels in what is currently the Folio Slack prefixed with VuFind. So there's a VuFind general there as a starting example. So before too long, I think all the VuFind Slack channels are just going to say, please go over to the OLF one. But there's some work going on behind the scenes to rename that Slack from Folio to OLF and make it more multi-project friendly. So we've been sort of taking it slow while those things are in motion. But it will be nice to not have to subscribe to quite so many Slacks for us to work together. But in the meantime, go wherever you're comfortable, and I'm trying to keep track of everything. We also have some listservs, which used to be the best way to reach us, but nobody likes listservs anymore. Makes me a little sad, but they still exist. You can use those too.
I'll just make a comment. Damian talked about, don't be afraid to submit ugly, messy code, and he won't call you out of it. I have submitted a lot of ugly, messy code to Damian, and he's never called me out of it. He just says, here's an idea, how we can make this even better. And so people shouldn't be afraid to contribute their, their contributions and help out other community members.
So in case you didn't hear that at home, that was just affirming that you won't be shamed for the code you submit to the project. And, the flip side of that is I do tend to leave a lot of feedback, all of which is intended to be constructive. And I really appreciate the fact that people seem to appreciate that, because I sometimes worry, should I leave a comment that there's an extra space here? But, I'll leave the comment. They'll forgive me. I don't know. I feel like I need to start a debate in the room to get the conversation going. I don't have a strong opinion on Star Trek captains, though. So.
Well, questions this year.
That's true. Well, I could ask who your favorite dime novel hero is, but nobody will have an answer to that question.
So, on the subject of sorting items, specifically thinking of portfolio, driver relationship to VuFind. And I know there have been issues with, you have a list of 100 serials, which we do. Trying to figure out the best way to sort that. So for example, we're trying to figure out how to sort it with the most recent year on top to past year. We've seen the University of Chicago did it, we don't know how they did it. So things like that, what kind of work is being done either on the VuFind side or on the Folio side to make that work better?
So the question was, what work is being done on the VuFind and or Folio sides to improve the experience of sorting items within lists? So for example, a large list of periodicals, how would you sort that by date descending in a reliable way? And the answer is I'm not aware of current ongoing work on that. I mean, the current state of affairs is that Folio's API offers some sorting capabilities, but if my memory serves me correctly, they're not ideal because of the sorting algorithm being used. So you can use it, but you might not get the order that you expect, particularly if you're dealing with numeric fields, like it's going to sort alphabetically. So 1, 11, 3, 45, 6, which isn't great. So VuFind's Folio driver has a lot of settings around sorting of items. So you can either pass through to Folio and use one of those sorting options, or you can take all the data from Folio and sort it within VuFind's code using a more human-readable sorting algorithm. The trade-off being that sorting it inside VuFind means you have to retrieve all the data and then do work on it, which is slower and requires more memory. So I think you can always customize the driver to do any kind of sorting you want in PHP space, but that's going to be problematic, especially I think hundreds would be fine, but if you had hundreds of thousands of items, it would probably be less fine. And I don't know if any work is being done on the Folio side. I'm sort of out of that loop, though I welcome people who are in that loop to feed me information. I should also plug my Folio driver talk tomorrow, where I'll give some information about customizing the Folio driver and what its current state is and so forth. Though there's only so much I can do in 30 minutes, but I'll do my best, and you can always reach out to me any other time.
Does the explain feature work for Folio?
The explain feature is only for solar relevance ranking, yeah. You can turn on debugging to find out more about what the Folio driver is actually doing. So that is a possibility if you just want to see what's happening under the hood. But I think it all just comes down to the sort of options that Folio gives you aren't flexible enough for what we would ideally want. Though for year, it might be good enough. I can't remember what the fields are. I know for volume and issue number, it's not great. Well, if this is a satisfied room full of people, I don't need to hold you extra time, but I'm still here, so don't hold back. All right, well, thank you all for coming and for your attention. And my contact information is up there. I'm always happy to talk more about VuFind, so reach out to me whenever.